Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, we're going to step into the zone of spoilers with our discussion on the Super Mario Galaxy film. Now, if you've been listening to this podcast for a little while, then you would have known that I think for me in particular, I had a lot of hype, but also a lot of fear going into the Mario Galaxy movie because Mario Galaxy, the original from 2007 on Wii, is one of my favorite games, from the atmosphere to the level design to the music to the presentation. And as one of the games that has the smallest yet notable amount of story and lore, I was very curious to see how that would be translated into a new Illumination movie. Now, going back to the original Mario Brothers movie from 2023, that film had presentation down to a T. It was a fabulous looking movie. It was a wonderful sounding movie. But beyond that, characters and story, the core elements of what makes films so compelling, non existent, poor, not that well executed. And the amount of licensed music in there drove me insane. So I had fear going into this new one, but I had hope. But considering what this film is, I shouldn't have been surprised by the end result. Just in terms of like, before we get into like spoiler specifics, I'll literally just say this. The Mario Galaxy film, once again, when it comes to the presentation, is a beautiful looking movie. It's stunning, and the music from Brian Tyler borrows elements from the Mario Galaxy games along with other compositions from the Mario games, and that's all fantastic. But when it comes to the story, it seems like it's even less than what came before, less coherent, less structured. It's overstuffed with so much stuff, and it just doesn't seem to know when to pause to allow whatever elements it's trying to communicate to the audience to simmer and resonate. It's got its foot on the gas, constantly going from scene to scene. And by the end of the movie, I'm just like, fun was had for sure, but at what cost? So yeah, Vincent, I'm just curious, like your general thoughts about the Mario Galaxy movie before we go into like nitty gritty.
Well, it really just feels like one 10-minute TikTok video stitched together to form like some cohesive movie. As in, like, every new 10-minute scene was a completely different film. It's like a long robot chicken episode, but like you're the joke, I guess, like the viewer. But as I said, like I watched it on a matinee, just a lot of kids in the theater, and they seem to enjoy it. And it's something that, like, behind me were like a couple of preteens just basically trying to predict the next scene, and would basically show off to each other how much Mario lore they know. And to the point where sometimes, like, I feel like I'm watching like a director's commentary with these two kids in the background. And there you go, there's your target audience, right? But yeah, as I said, it just feels like a long robot chicken, like it's like it's like a robot chicken movie, but all with Mario characters, each with its own like episodic plot, while like just the cohesion was basically all over the place. Just like new characters were introduced. What's that? Nostalgia and elderberry like soup was served basically. um and I was loving it until, like, you get out of the film and it just feels like I went for a binge in a fast food restaurant. And and then basically after that, I just there's a lot of emptiness after all that fun. But I wouldn't say that, like, I didn't enjoy myself. I did enjoy myself, even with the kids' commentary behind me. It's just, if you are looking for a cohesive film, this is not the film to go to. Yeah.
Yeah, so what we're gonna do now, we're gonna dive into spoiler based territory. So again, if you haven't seen the film, leave and then come back later on. Or if you have seen the film, obviously stick around because we're gonna be touching on a few more specifics. Now, the problem with this film is that there is so much stuff in here. Trying to touch upon all of it would be insane. But I'm just gonna touch upon all of the sort of key details that stood out to me because I think between the two of us, I'm probably the guy that has like more knowledge when it comes to like, Mario specific stuff. So what I'll touch upon is just like the overstuffed nature of this film because with the first Mario film, it was messy but still straightforward. But with this film, you've got Rosalina in space being the guardian of the stars. Bowser Jr. is coming to get her because she has powers that he can siphon away to power up this machine that he's always wanted to utilize because it was something that his dad told him about when he was younger. Because they have a plan that they were going to rule the galaxy together as father and son, like in a sort of Star Warsy kind of way. When Peach finds out about Rosalina being in trouble, her and Toad go off in space to try and like save her ass. So that means the Mario brothers, who also happen to come into contact with Yoshi, they have to try and keep the Mario Kingdom, the Mushroom Kingdom safe from everybody who's potentially going to invade. While that's happening, Bowser, who is slightly reformed in his tiny form, has this whole thing where he's like trying to adjust to this life of not being as villainous as he was before. But then when he comes into contact with his son, there's a sort of potential moral quandary about him going back to his old life, but also trying to appreciate these sort of new friends that he has. Peach and Toad are hanging around in space and also having to come into contact with what what's the name of that other mouse dude and Birdo, as like they have this whole little underground like villain world that's going on. And god, even me just saying all that stuff is just it's exhausting. It's so much stuff. And then there's a weird tangent where they go to the one planet where the queen like bee lady from the honey from now I'm actually forgetting the name of that like honey hive like galaxy from it again. I'm imploding because there's so much stuff going on in this movie and it's ridiculous. What is happening? I don't
What is
understand.
happening?
But you can see, ladies and gents, as I'm trying to talk about this film has so many things happening. And the way that the film decides to segment everything, it's like, okay, we're here with these characters, but now we're going back to these characters who are on the other side of the galaxy. Then there's some other stuff going on in this part of the galaxy. Eventually, certain things will line up, but then they'll sort of like space out and detract again. It's just like, where's your sense of cohesion? Where's your through line? And when you watch the film, especially once you get to the latter side of it, you realize how much of this stuff is so unnecessary. There's so much superfluous material. And you could have shaved about maybe 10 to 20 minutes off of this film, cut a bunch of like, subplots and other characters out, and you could have had something way more focused. That's the word I would say that this film isn't. Oh, no. This film is unfocused. That's the word I'm looking for. Unfocused would be the word.
Yeah, Kurt really summed it up, the whole robot chicken style format, like how everything is just like wrapped together. Because yeah, you start off the film, and then you run into Yoshi, and then now Yoshi's their best friend, and basically plot device. If you need to get out of something, Yoshi will get them out of it. I was just waiting for the moment when like Mario basically like betrays Yoshi, just like kicks him off to do that extra jump. I was just waiting for that moment, and then Donald Glover would be like, "Yo, boy, what's up, Mario? It's me, Yoshi." Yeah, I was just waiting for that moment, but yeah, it didn't happen. You can only hope for so much. But that's what the film kind of pushes for, right? Like you have all the colorful stuff and the wacky moments and just non-stop action, just to keep the kids entertained, and I guess the people on their phones entertained, right? Like you don't need, and that's the best part. It's like it's a perfect movie to watch with a phone. You can go scroll your TikToks or whatever you kids are into these days, and like catch up with your snaps, and then you look up, and then you really didn't miss anything. Because even like actual plot lines, such as the whole Bowser wanting to reconnect with his son because his son was in a he basically was an absentee dad, but then the son really idolizes the dad, and then basically that whole kind of like plot line has been like easily completed, so that conflict was gone, and then now the whole Bowser trying to like basically turn on his new friends, but I don't know if it's really friendship. Like I really think this is Stockholm syndrome,
That's a
like
fair point.
it's like I think like Mario and Luigi at that point were just like, no, no, this guy's too dangerous to be left alive, right? But like they need to keep him alive for some weird reason, just to have a sequel, I guess.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's how it basically worked, right? when he betrayed Mario and Luigi, I really didn't, that's basically where it's gonna go, right? Because as much as Benny Safdie did Bowser Jr. a lot of gravitas, it just seemed like it's not the same presence as Bowser, right? Until he came back as the big bad again. Kind of reminds me of the whole Voltron thing when they got rid of the main big bad, and then basically the prince whatever just didn't carry the same amount of weight as the original big bad, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's basically how I felt about it. And then the other through line was the whole Rosalina and Peach storyline, which they kind of touch upon it, and then they kind of let us forget about it. We just go with this whole wacky thing, and then we go back and oh, that's still a thing, right? And in the end, I guess like the whole theme of the princess saving herself and saving another princess, I guess, just to divert that trope, and it's pretty cool in a way. And I'd say, but that's the thing though. As you said, there's no through line. Like every single new 10-minute segment, it's its own little thing, right? And then
Yeah.
when they bring back like a past plot point, you just see them be, oh, that's still going on because last thing I checked, they're doing some baby dinosaur freaking Super NES scope blasting thing, right? Like, okay, cool, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I don't know. It's really hard to reconcile while the one inside it, like the little the kid Vince inside of me just going, oh my god, that's like from Super Mario 2. Like, oh my god, like you got the Super Nintendo scope thing. I guess that's what they're trying to do. For the poor parents that have to accompany their kids to watch this movie, they just basically go, okay, like, do you remember this? Like, do you remember this piece of nostalgia? So I guess once in a while the parents would like stop checking their Microsoft Teams and just go, oh, that's pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to like the movie. That's basically all I want to say.
Yeah, and
But it's really difficult to do so.
I'm pretty much in the same boat because the thing is, a lot of the stuff in this film is for me and a lot of other, like, Mario and Nintendo fans because they've got references up the wazoo all over the place. Some of it big, some of it small, some of it's audio, and some of it's visual. You don't know how much joy I and a few other people in the cinema I had when Mr. Game and Watch showed up with Luigi, like, using that magic paintbrush, and that's what he came up with, Mr. Game and Watch. And I'm like, oh my gosh, is that dude? No way. That's crazy, man. And even though Nintendo technically like ruined the surprise, Star Fox's segment in the movie was genuinely fab. I love the sort of random 80s aesthetic that they gave him, and the art direction and animation that they had for him telling his backstory with his crew. It was fantastic. And the fact that Brian Tyler also got to utilize those Star Fox themes for not only his backstory, but also the segment when Fox is in space flying with the guys, and they had literally the old like music while they're going through the asteroid field. I'm like, this is insane. I'm having the best time of my life. It's great. And again, some of the subtle music references to various different like Mario Galaxy themes, whether it was like when Bowser Jr. had come to extract the castle from the Mushroom Kingdom, or during some of the battle sequences towards the end. I'm like, this is fab. Even the use of the Super Scope to turn the Mario Brothers into babies. I'm like, that's what you're using the Super Scope for? Okay. And the big T-Rex, which I think a lot of people would recognize as like one of the random dinosaurs that just showed up in Mario Odyssey. I was surprised to find him on the planet, but I'm like, hey, it's the big T-Rex. And even getting to see someone like Birdo and Wart from like, Super Mario Brothers 2 in their weird little underground area where a bunch of the other Mario villains just happen to hang out. I'm like, this is really fun. And then Rob, why is Rob there at the bloody airport? Like, with, I guess, the equivalent of what happened at the in Zootopia. You had that whole thing with I can't remember the name of that sloth character, but he had a similar thing where he was like trying to relay information, but it took him a long time to get it done. And Rob had a similar thing with this. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. I wouldn't say this film was crazy funny to me, but there were definitely moments where I was having, a good laugh with some of these references, especially like Fox when he got to hang around with the rest of the Loomers and they all had little like jackets on. I'm like, this is fab. I'm having such a good time. And even bloody like Bowser Jr. summoning the sort of purple dragon thing from Mario Odyssey. I'm like, oh, wow. And the credits music, again, really good stuff. The post credit scene, the last one where they introduced my girl, Daisy, so happy. That was the sort of post credit scene that, gets people like me super happy because between like Daisy, Peach, and Rosalina, like Daisy is one of those who a lot of Mario fans feel like she's been like, sort of pushed aside, especially after Odyssey came out because Pauline really started to blow up. So it feels like Daisy has been sort of relegated to the background because she's not really been a princess in her own game since, the old Game Boy title. The fact that she actually got some time in here might resurrect her, like, popularity with certain other Mario fans. But there's a whole lot of stuff in this film where I'm just like, okay, I wish you'd explain a little bit of that. Now, granted, in the world of animation, especially kids' movies, certain things just happen and you don't really question it. But in the Mario games with the Lumas, they're known to be these little creatures that if you feed them these things called star bits, they get filled up and explode and turn into different stuff. They can turn into planets, they can turn into those warp stars. And I really wish the film had done a little bit to explain some of these little mechanics because it's fascinating stuff. It's really fun. And I find it interesting that with Rosalina, they sort of skipped over her sort of original backstory and rejiggered it for her and Peach to be sisters. And it was an interesting angle because for most Nintendo fans out there, they have been speculating about if there was any sort of relationship between Peach and Rosalina. Some people just think it was a mother-daughter relationship, but no, they're actually sisters instead. And they also have some weird power where if they touch hands, they can recreate life. I'm like, I wish we could have gotten a little bit more information about that. But then it also made it a little bit more clear why Peach is so capable of just beating up everybody and not having too much issues with it. Because I'm like, oh, she's a space princess and she has god tier powers as well. Okay, that makes sense. But this film, man,
I
I think about
mean,
it, and for everything I love, I'm just like, I wish you'd done so much more with the Bowser angle. Like him
mhm,
facing like moral and ethical, like, questions about where he stands with the Mario Brothers and whether he could be, a slightly different kind of like villain or anti-villain. That would have been fun. And like you said, with Bowser Jr. and Bowser, I thought there was going to be some conflict or like some sort of resentment about like, Bowser Jr. not being able to see his dad for how long. And
mhm,
maybe he's just thinking, oh, I'm going to be a better villain than you. Or maybe it was going to be a case where Bowser Jr. could be like, oh, you've gone soft, relegate him to a dungeon or something. I'm going to show you how to take care of take care of the plan that you should have done. And even after like Rosalina and Peach end up like, having their family hug or whatever at the end of the movie. I'm like, that's all? You're not going to be like, oh my God, sister, I haven't seen you forever. Like, I have so many things to tell you. I've been watching over you for years and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, nothing. And one of the things I said in my other review on like Film Focus was that I feel like the Mario brothers were very reactionary. They didn't really have much to do in this movie. They felt like, supporting characters in like a film that has their name on it. And
mhm.
Yoshi, he also felt like, I wouldn't say an afterthought because he had his moments for sure, but he was there and then he's just part of the crew. I'm like, so that's it. He gets his little montage and then that's it. And he's a part of the crew. I'm like, okay, cool, I guess.
Yeah. Well, one thing for sure is this movie's probably gonna get a sequel because it made its budget in the opening weekend, and I guess just the U.S. and Canada alone made up for all the marketing
Yeah.
and the gross worldwide, revenue. Yeah, well, we're gonna see a third movie. My only fear is I hope it doesn't like fall into it just joins the many many random 3D animation style movies where it just a sequel comes up and you just go okay, it's just one of these films, just another Mario film, like another Smurfs film. When were you ever excited about a Smurfs film or a Garfield film or a even the Minions, for crying out loud, like there's like a Minions movie coming out, and I'm like, I guess some kids would be like excited about it. But yeah, as you said, like there's gonna be the new one with the introduction of Daisy, right? So um, but what do you think? Like, is Sonic falling into the same category now? Like you kind of go, okay, it's finished its trilogy. Now they're going for a fourth film, I guess, with Amy, right? So, I don't know. Like, I guess with the Mario film, do you think at the rate that they're going right now, just judging from the second film, do you think there's still a way that they can still elevate the movie to just, basically take it away from this, I would call it the 3D animation slop category? It's going to be for the kids, but it's kind of better to send the babysitter off to go watch rather than you like hanging out with your kids to watch like another Mario sequel.
I don't know because the thing is, with the box office of the previous film and this current one, I think it's speaking volumes to the people at Illumination and Nintendo. They're like, okay, well, we've come up with this story. They had the same screenwriter for both films, so there was some consistency in terms of like that not being very good. But the idea that you can put this film out there and you'll get a bunch of the fans to support, and then they'll drag whoever doesn't want to watch the film or not that interested in to get involved, that will literally just recoup all the money. And
Mm.
I don't want to look at this as purely a financial thing, but the thing is, I think they don't think about quality in the same way. Part of me, especially watching this film, is thinking, okay, this is looking like it's like they try to replicate the Mario game experience in a film where it's less about the story and it's more about the experience itself. What kind of stuff do you get to do in the Mario games would you be able to replicate in the movie in the most fun, exciting, and adventurous way? And in
Mhm.
that form, this film succeeds. But the story and character stuff being an afterthought, it just bothers me. And clearly it bothers a bunch of other people as well. However, the problem is, I think I don't know how much you've seen online, but there's a lot of people defending the movie saying the Mario games don't have story and character stuff. So why should you expect that in the movie? I had a good time. I got all the references. The film looked and sounded great. That should be enough. And I'm like, but that shouldn't be like, the base level. Now, I'm not saying that like Mario needs to be like the most epic, well told story ever in the history of existence with like, characters that are going to make you cry and weep and, think about life after you step out the cinema. But I'm just asking for a little substance because again, film and TV is a medium where like story and character are at the forefront, and presentation, that can only take you so far. And clearly there's an audience for this who are happy to take that. But there is this weird sort of conversation going on online right now about the nature of this film and whether if you're like a fan, then that's for you, and anybody else should just shut up and enjoy the film or just not watch it. And
Mhm.
we saw this again with Five Nights at Freddy's, like,
Yeah.
both of those entries as well, where the fandom, like, came to the defense of the film and said any critics who disliked it, they're not only not fans, but they're also idiots. And I'm like, the black and white nature of discussions of film is astronomically painful to my mind. Um, but also, again, the fact that people are defending the choice of it being just for kids as like the excuse to not expect more from the story and characters department is absurd because you look at the stuff that's happening with Sony Pictures Animation with what they've done in the last few years. Even Pixar are starting to work their way back with really solid story and character material in their stuff. And it doesn't even have to be that hard or that deep. You just need to come up with like some story with themes and ideas that resonate not only with kids but also with parents. So it's stuff that not only the kids will be able to remember beyond the shiny like visuals, but also stuff that they'll want to talk about with their parents afterwards or talk about with their friends, like, oh, this character went from being this to this. I found that interesting. But I don't know. I guess they're just not interested in going that much deeper with Mario because, again, I think they're just looking at Mario as the gameplay experience that it's always been and just trying to translate that into the film.
Mhm.
And unless they decide to change the writer and change the approach, because this film feels like it went for a bigger is better approach. But I think the only place this film has succeeded is taking away all that licensed music. There was like a fraction in this film. That made me very happy. But unless they just decide to change the writer and possibly scale down or at least narrow the focus to having like, is it either a new big bad or a new sort of adventure that requires a number of the characters but not too many? I don't know, because with Bowser and Bowser Jr. in jail, they may escape or someone might bust them out. But I'm trying to figure out what villains would be interesting enough to bring Bowser and Bowser Jr. either into the fray or leave them in the background while, the Mario characters contend with these new people. The only people I can think of right now would be Wario and Waluigi. Now, that
Hmm.
would be fun, but Wario is probably more villainous than Waluigi. Waluigi is more of a clown, but
Hmm.
depending on how they decide to do it, they could go with the plot line from Super Mario Land on the Game Boy,
Yeah.
where Wario basically took over Mario's
Yeah.
castle and just ruled over that place for ages. And then it could just be a case of him just trying to get the castle back. But I don't know.
Well, anything can happen, and at this point, they've introduced Star Fox, so smash.
Man, I know a lot of people have been talking about that, especially with the fact that not only was Fox in there, but you also had Mr. Game & Watch temporarily and Rob. So you already have them along with the rest of the other Mario characters from the Mushroom Kingdom in this world. The only problem is they still haven't figured out how they'd integrate Zelda into this, because Link and Zelda, they already come into they'll show up in film for the first time in live action. So unless they're going to take those incarnations of the characters or are going to pull a Spider-Verse and then just pull a set of those characters from another world and then bring them in. Smash Brothers is potentially interesting, but it depends on who they're going to bring in. If they're going to start off being primarily Nintendo based, like they was with like the first two games, you could get away with that. But if you're going to try and do Smash Brothers Brawl onwards, where we got guest characters, the licensing for that would be insane. And I don't know if Nintendo have the same sort of pull that Sakurai does, because Sakurai knows a bunch of people and he has a vision and a passion for this stuff to try and draw everything together. So I don't know. I It would be fun, but if it's under Illumination, I feel like a lot of the fun would be just seeing everything happen, but like, even less story than some of those games had. So I'm just like, I don't know. Unless they were going to try and do Subspace Emissary from Brawl, which would be crazy fun if they could pull it off. But I don't trust them. I don't trust them.
Well, one thing is, since it's Illumination, might I suggest Mario and Rabbids?
God, oh my God.
Then we show them Illumination, like basically does what they do best: create the fucking minions in Super Mario form, in the form of the rabbits. Though, but
You know
that's
what?
just me.
I mean, to be fair, in some weird, twisted way, this could also help out Ubisoft because they've been in a pretty bad, sort of situation, you know, for a little while now. But if you were to introduce Ubisoft into the fold with the rabbits as well, put them in Illumination and like find a way to make that sort of match work, um, it could be solid and it would be, financially beneficial to Ubisoft as well because it's like tangentially linked to them. But
Pretty much.
I
You
don't know.
basically are printing money.
Yeah, but I don't know how much the rabbits would resonate with audiences. Like, because if Mario 3, which was it, Jack Black's mentioned in the news recently that it might potentially be showing up in 2029, the
Yeah,
next like Mario potential Rabbids crossover, that would have to be at least maybe 2 or 3 years after that. And by that point, I don't know how many years deep we would have been with like Minions related stuff because we've had four Despicable Me films and like what? I think three or four. Like I think
we're getting another one this year. Yeah,
yeah, so I can't
another
remember if that
Minion
that new
films.
Minions film is the fourth one or the third one,
Probably the fourth one at this point.
but yeah,
At this point,
it's
who's
been
counting?
it's been 13 years. Like wait, hold on. Actually no, I think the first one came out in 2010, I think.
Yeah,
Oh god. Oh no. But yeah, I think by the time we'd gotten past like what the first solo Minions movie, I was sort of tapped out. but they've just kept going, and it just seems so redundant at this point that unless you're like some diehard Minions fan, these films aren't really doing much for anybody anymore. Everyone's sort of just looking to DreamWorks and Sony to pick up the slack in terms of the story and character department, along with having good visuals. But yeah, to bring it back to the Mario Galaxy thing real quick, man, I had high hopes, but also notable fears, and I feel like both were realized. Again, the film looks good. It sounds fantastic, and there are like glimpses of a film that could have been great, but just too many tangents with random scenarios and characters that don't get the time of day. A story that just feels like it's all over the place. And like you said, once the film was over, I'm just like, I had fun. There were high highs. I was giddy on the inside, but I felt so hollow afterwards. I'm just like, I guess I don't know if I'll ever watch that again. Maybe just wait for someone to highlight all the fun clips on YouTube and then probably just watch it that way.
I guess so, yeah, at this point.